Hello. My name is Kaczmar and welcome to Geek Factor TV. Today I'll be taking a look at a game called Wizard's Towers. Wizard's Towers is a game that was published in Poland by Imagine Realm, but a different publisher from Poland, Chaha Games, is bringing this game to Kickstarter so that an English language version and other language versions are available to players all over the world. Now, the Kickstarter hasn't launched yet, at least today at the time of shooting this video, but once the Kickstarter launches, you can find the link to the Kickstarter campaign in the description below. So if the link isn't there, it means the Kickstarter campaign hasn't started yet. So in this game, you'll be taking those wooden blocks and building big, impressive, magical towers in front of yourself, and you will be placing them like so. Those wooden blocks are going to be called structures in this game. So this is what you'll be doing, but you'll also be playing powerful magical spells from your hand in order to attack other players' towers. Now, traditionally, let's start with the setup. Before we get into the details of the setup, I want to first show you how to build your tower, because this is exactly what you'll be doing. You'll be taking two structures and then placing two other structures on top of them. Now, this is a level 1 tower, like this is the first level. This is a second level, this one right here on the top. This one also has two levels, but if I want to expand it and I put a single structure right here, then this is a third level. This is how building a tower works. Now, as part of this setup, you take all the structures, all the wooden pieces, and you put them in a pile in the middle of the gaming area. This is considered a source. This is what is going to be called throughout this whole game, throughout this whole tutorial. Next to the source, you place the section tiles, the recall deck, and the elements deck. Now we also leave some space for discard pile for both of those decks. Now every player draws two cards from the elements deck without showing them to the other players, and they put them in your hand. Then the shortest player is the first player and he or she begins the game. So that was the setup. Now the way this game works is each player will take a turn and performing a single action. Now through those actions you will be, among other things, taking those structures and placing them in your gaming area. Now you'll be able to do one of two things. You'll either be able to build your tower like so, or you'll be able to place them, well, let's say, to the right of your gaming area, and you'll be adding them to your so-called storehouse. So this is how the game works. Now the first action each player will take on their very first turn has to be recall action. Now let's see how recall action works, because this is the first action every player has to take as their first action. The recall action allows you to draw structures from the source and begin building or continue building your tower, or placing them in your storehouse. The way it works is you draw the top card from the recall deck, and then you take as many structures as you can see on the card. So this card, for example, says two structures, so I take those two structures and I take them to my gaming area. Now I have a choice. I can either begin or continue building my tower, or I can place them in my storehouse. Now two things can happen when you draw a card from the recall deck. You can draw a card that has one structure on it. Now with a single structure on a recall card, it is considered a weak draw, which means that you take this one structure that is printed on the card, but you do not put it in your tower. You have to place it in your storehouse. If you draw 2, 3, or 4 structures from the source due to the recall card, then you have a choice whether you want to place them in your tower or whether you want to place them in your storehouse. Now from the second turn moving forward, every player, while performing their single action, has a number of actions to choose from. Those actions are recall, which we discussed just a second ago, a strengthened recall, which is a gamble where you risk losing a card from your hand, but the success of a successful play of that action, the successful performance of that action can gain you a lot of structures to put in your tower. Then there's the purchasing of a elements card that you get to put on your hand that you can use for spells later on, for example. Then there is the building a section action, and finally there's the attack action. Let's see how those actions are performed. So the first action we're going to talk about is a strengthened recall. Now the way a strengthened recall works is you take a look at the element cards you have in your hand, you declare that you want to play a strengthened recall, you show the card, and you take a look at the value in the corners of this card. For example, this card has a value 2 in the corners. So what I do is I take this card, I discard it, but I also draw a card from the top of the element deck. Now two things can happen. I can draw a card where the value and the number of the structures equals the value of the elements card that I just discarded, and when that happens, your risk pays off, and you can now take 3 times that number of structures from the source. So in this case, I played a card with the number 2, which means that I can draw 6 structures, and what I do with them is I can't place them in my storehouse, I immediately have to add them to my tower. Now the second thing that can happen is obviously the fact that I can draw a card that does not match the value of the elements card that I just discarded. In this case, nothing happens, I simply discard both cards. This next action that I'm going to talk to you about is purchasing a elements card. The way that works is I discard 3 of my structures from my storehouse, and then I simply draw the top card from the elements deck and I add it to my hand. Now be warned, at any point during the game you cannot have more than 6 elements cards in your hand. This next action I'm going to talk to you about is building a section. Sections are used to protect the lower levels of your towers. They protect you against most of the attack spells, not all of them, but most of them. The way you perform that action is you take 6 structures from your storehouse and you discard them. Then you take one of the section tiles and you place them in your tower. There is, however, one condition. Your tower must have at least 5 levels built on top of either a previously built section or on the table if this is the first section you're building. If you have 5 levels, you can build your section by simply placing it on top of your tower. As an added bonus to building a section, you now draw a single elements card from the elements deck and you place it in your hand. Remember about sticking to the limit of 6 cards in your hand. Now this final action I'm going to talk to you about is the attack action. This is where you can attack the other player's towers. Now the way that works is you take a look at your hand and you see which attacks you can perform. Each player has an attack chart and then they can take a look if they can perform any of the attacks listed here. The thing you see on the left is the cost. These are the cards you have to discard. If I see 3 symbols like this in here, it means I have to discard 3 cards with that symbol in order to perform this attack. Now obviously I'm not gonna go through all of these attacks. They are pretty simple, they are pretty self-explanatory. You don't need to think really hard about what each attack means. Let's just give you an example right now. As you can see, I have 3 of those cards in my hand, which means I can discard them and I can perform this flood attack. Now this tells me that I get to take away 7 structures from any of my opponent's towers. Now, so the way that it works is I declare an attack action, I declare the opponent at which this attack is directed, and I perform it. I discard the elements cards, and then I perform the action. Now this is a good opportunity to show you how those sections work, because this flood attack says that I can take 7 structures from my enemy's tower. So I start doing that obviously from the top. So I go 2, 4, 6, and 7. It's done. But let's say that my opponent had this tower in front of him. I still perform the flood attack and I go 1, 2, 3, and that's it. I cannot remove any of the structures below the section. There are attacks that allow you to do that. There are attacks that allow you to take the structures away, as well as a section if you happen upon a section while taking away those, for example, 7 or 6 or however many structures from your enemy's tower. But if the action does not specify that you can take away your enemy's section, you have to stop at the section when you're removing your opponent's structures. Now those are those main actions that you perform while playing this game, but there are 3 smaller side or additional actions that you get to perform while playing or performing your main actions. Let's see what those additional actions are and how to play them. So the first additional action that you can perform is taking one structure from your storehouse and adding it to your tower. However, if you do that, you cannot perform a recall action. This is the only limitation, this is the only additional action that limits which main action you can perform. All the other main actions are still available. If you added one structure from your storehouse to your tower, you can still perform purchasing, you can still perform attacking. You cannot, however, perform a recall. Now another additional action involves taking some elements cards into your hand. You can take any 2 elements cards from your hand of your choosing, you discard them, and in their place you draw one, but only one card from the top of the element deck and you add it to your hand. So as you can see, that wasn't really a smart choice on my part, in this at least case. And the final additional action is obviously defending. This is obviously only an action that you perform when you're being attacked by another player. The way you do that is you simply discard those cards from your hand, those elements cards from your hand, in order to defend yourself against certain attacks. You can't defend yourself against all attacks, but you can defend yourself against some. So that's pretty much it. That's how you play the game. The game finishes once this source is depleted. Then the player with the highest tower wins. Now, obviously, whenever either of those decks, the Elements deck or the Recall deck, is depleted, you simply reshuffle the discard deck and you form a new deck. Now, there are various modes to this game. For example, there is this so-called fast mode, because whenever you discard, you probably were asking yourself when I was showing you how to perform certain actions and I was discarding structures, you were probably wondering, but where do those structures go? Well, if you want to play this game with a fast mode, like you want it to be a really short, fast game, those structures are simply removed from the game. You can put them back in the box. But if you want to play by the normal rules, then any structure you discard, for example, when you're attacked, or when you're buying an elements card, or when you're building a section, you place those structures back in the source. So that's the normal mode. Removing them completely from a game is a faster mode. Now there is also an advanced mode using a smaller deck of so-called special cards, but I'll let you discover that one completely on your own. You should not have any problems with that once you've understood what I just showed you. So I think that's it. Listen, like I said, there is a Kickstarter campaign for this game. If there is no link to the Kickstarter campaign in the description below, it means the Kickstarter hasn't started yet, because once it starts, I will immediately post a link in the description of this video. So if you have any questions, if you have any comments, do not hesitate to post them below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And in the meantime, thank you very much for watching. Leave a comment, leave a like, leave a subscription. It's entirely up to you, and I truly hope I get to see you soon. Thank you and bye-bye.